In 2020, the festival singers recorded a composition by their accompanist, Jonathan Berkahn. This is the story of a Hopkins Gloria.
Just about everything I know about choral texture, I've learnt, and actually choral process, I've learnt through the festival singers. I sang with them as a first and second year student in 1990 and 1991, and then in 1999 I started as accompanist, and I've been sort of involved continuously with them ever since. First as accompanist and then conductor, and now accompanist again, which is great.
And when I first joined, Jonathan Berkahn was a new young singer as well, and then my first year. So I remember him from then, and I've been watching him grow through his musical life, which is kind of fun.
Throughout that time, he's come up with some amazing compositions.
There was this really fun Gloria, and it was it was written for this youth choir that I was in and helped out with, and it was, I remember this sort of terror at having to conduct it once, because it was in 14/8 and then I think 10/8, and it sort of alternated, and it sounds like, sort of a mess, but it actually wasn't. It was really, really super rhythmic and really fun to do. And I was just like, oh, we should build a concert around this Gloria. Actually, why don't you just write a Gloria? Just write a big one.
How hard could it be?
So it was this little 2-minute piece that kind of started that.
The Gloria is a traditional Anglican piece of liturgical music.
It's been set to music many, many times as an idea. It's said in churches around the world over centuries, and so for someone to come up with something fresh and new that still speaks to that music and still serves the purpose of giving glory to God is sort of a challenge, because it's been done before,
So did the idea of the piece come first and then the concert built around Glorias, or was it the other way around?
Yeah, I think it was the concert built around Glorias.
Right, there we go.
And we thought, well, you should just build a Gloria to build the concert around. Yeah.
I sort of drew a little map on a piece of paper. In the old days, they had these things called cantata masses, where you stretch out the text to huge amounts just by repeating it over and over and over and over. And so each clause of the text is a separate movement. And so I thought of doing something like that. However, quite early on in the process, I decided actually I wanted this to be in English. I felt that once I decided to do it in English, which is basically the text from the New Zealand prayer book, the Gloria text from there, I felt I couldn't repeat these words that were meaningful to me as if they weren't, as if they were just clotheslines on which to peg chunks of music. So that gave me a whole different problem. How do I make this piece where I'm not going to allow myself that kind of verbal repetition? How do I make it long enough? And then I thought of Hopkins, and I thought, Gloria, this is a Gloria. Glory be to God for dapple. What if we were to insert that somewhere?
Well, I like Hopkins' poetry, and I like the way that Jonathan chose poems that fit.
His music serves the words, and the meaning of the words comes through. Well, he finds words that are interesting to him, and then off he goes and writes some amazing music to go with it. So in this case, it's Gerard Manley Hopkins. Some of the poems are quite famous, some of them not so much.
I've read a few of Gerard Manley Hopkins' poems before and thought they were really good, and it's quite interesting to sing.
He set them all to fit into the sense of a Gloria.
And I wonder if I could find, so I've got various anthologies, and I trawled through and thought, I wonder if we could find something really dark and gritty for the Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world, have mercy on us, grant us your peace. I thought, nobody gets grittier and grimmer and more appallingly depressed than Hopkins.
but I also see when he brings in the Hopkins things, and there's poetry, there's concepts out in the world.
And then at the end of that, which is about as harrowing as a text can be, I thought, oh, but we've got to get back to, but you alone are the Holy One, you alone, happy, 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 joy, joy, which, traditionally returns to the opening music as well. How am I going to do that from way down here? And so again, I was trawling through Hopkins' texts, and I came across the bit
Enough, the resurrection.
the resurrection, etc.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
And I thought, oh yeah, that'll do the job. And it kind of did, I think. So once I'd sort of mapped out the various bits of text, then I had to make the music.
Because of Jonathan's kind of particular musical interests, they're so wide-ranging, he produces these works which are really interesting in terms of coming from different angles. And it produces classical music which is user-friendly, if you like, or user-friendly music which is classical, depending on how you think about it.
There's a real tension there when you've got 4 separate voice types, each of which wants to have interesting stuff to do. So there's a kind of a contrapuntal imperative, just so that the choir feel good singing it. The real development for me is finding more interesting and attractive solutions for inner parts in a style that's still basically all about the tune.
I spent quite a lot of time learning it in detail partly it was so exciting. We had this piece and it was for us, and never before had it been heard, so it was kind of, like a new Harry Potter book or something. So with each movement I would go and learn it meticulously, and it was really fun. So I would sing through all the 4 parts, and one of the things I liked best about it were that there are good bass lines, there are good tenor lines, and best of all, there are good alto lines. With anyone can write a decent soprano tune, but to have all 4 parts work and a really nice harmonic progression.
This has been a most extraordinary experience working with Ingrid on this. She's got so much more attention to detail than I do. So for example, the reason we've got metronome markings are because she sat me down in front of this piano and said, right, how fast is this going to be? And I said, oh, well, no, how fast is it? And just a whole bunch of really, really focused questions, how long is this note? That sort of stuff that forced me to make decisions in a way that I hadn't quite had to before, I think. Yeah.
But I had the sense it wasn't just, you have to be more specific or something, but that there was something really clear being communicated in the music. And then I felt like all those questions had concrete answers.
We have actually a wealth of instrumentalists in the choir, which we used on our last recording of the third day. We had a recorder consort, we had a string ensemble come in to do some overdubs and that sort of thing. And I'd liked to have had a kind of early Baroque sort of vocal instrumental ensembles where you've got your shawms over there and your sackbuts over there, cornetti over here, recorders up there like angels, your fiddlers over here, and your choir in the middle, all producing this glorious noise. That's kind of what I had in mind. We ended up with one saxophone and a piano.
But I'm glad you picked a soprano saxophone. I mean, it's such a vocal kind of
it really
thing,
is,
but it also kind of cut through the choir.
It.
Yeah, and I think it has a kind of energy
that
another instrument wouldn't have,
like
like the beginning of the Gloria. I love just the first couple of bars that the choir sing.
Yeah,
and with the saxophone.
That's
on top.
right.
And it's just there's so much energy and there's so much sound, and another instrument wouldn't have. It wouldn't be the same with a violin.
That's true. That's true.
It just wouldn't.
And as she does that, in when I'm performing it with them, there's this marvelous sense that, no matter how loud and excited we're going to get, she can peel over the top and she's going to have plenty in the tank. And it's just one of those stupidly simple moments that is just so much more effective than I imagined it would be. So we didn't have recorders in the end. I'm very, very sorry, Megan and Karen and Helen. We don't have violins or strings, but we do have a fabulous sax player.
And when we were singing it and recording, oh goodness me, it's very easy to get distracted from the bit you're meant to be singing that we know very well, because in comes this astounding saxophone sound. So it's sort of a challenge to keep on task when you're recording it.
And Genevieve was wonderful as well. I mean, the soprano saxophone is, I think it's such a great choice. It's such a vocal instrument, and so it's really interesting with the choir. And I think that expressive quality at the beginning of the movement, the first movement and the fourth movement, that Genevieve really nailed that quasi-improvised, almost folk music with a saxophone is really what that feels like. And I think she just really got what that was about and did such a lovely job of those parts.
I quite like the words for the solos, the alto solo section. I thought it was pretty cool, and it was neat to have Eleanor, who we had for the recording.
I think it was a challenging solo, not just vocally, because it needs somebody with sort of this beautiful alto mezzo register, which Eleanor has. So vocally, she really has all the goods. But challenging because it's so kind of intimate and personal and needs to be sung that way, but actually requires quite a lot of power and conviction. And I think she struck that balance really well.
All the things that I wanted to happen happened. And, basically, if you are sensitive to the vocal rhythm and the weight of particular words, I mean, ideally the rhythm will sort of kind of sing itself in a way. It's not a simple rhythm because it's not a simple text, and actually that bit was the bit of the piece. I spent hours and hours and hours, and then some more hours trying to get less wrong. But if you just show a deep awareness of the text, that will carry you through, I think.
Taking on the role of musical director, Ingrid Schoenfeld led the festival singers' preparations for recording day.
Yes, Ingrid is very energetic and very enthusiastic and dynamic and excited and excitable, and really brings the choir along with her,
Ingrid's a wonderful leader of a group. She is really enthusiastic. She does an awful lot of background work in terms of studying scores and the sorts of decisions that she's going to make, and she's learning all the time.
In some ways, Ingrid works us a lot harder than Jonathan used to. He used to let us get away with some sloppy endings, but Ingrid's stricter on some of those things.
I just think having a real clarity of musical intention is absolutely essential.
I've just been so impressed at how much work she puts into the music and to what she's doing.
It's worth holding the choir to a standard, to being like, this is how it's written, this is how the words go. This is the melody, not an approximation of it. That is the rhythm, not an approximation of it. I mean, because there are actually very clear intentions. You didn't write this sort of like, however you feel the rhythm is how you feel it. It's really not like that.
So it feels like she is more prepared than any of us. She knows what she's doing. She knows what she's wanted.
It was a pleasure to rehearse it and to put the level of detail in that we don't always have time for.
And I do feel like if you're directing a piece, you do need to possess it a bit and decide how it will go. And if you're telling 40 people what to do, you need to have a vision of it. And there's not a lot of room for humming and hawing. I mean, there's room for trying out different things and making decisions, but I do think any interpretation, there's an infinite number of ways you could do a Chopin nocturne. But the thing that makes a performance convincing is that you commit to one in that moment, and you could do a different one the next day, but you're committing to a particular idea.
She sometimes isn't as confident about her abilities as she could be, she should be, because she does such an incredible job and gets such a lot out of the choir.
She brings more from the choir than if she was less energetic, and less enthusiastic. Her youth and enthusiasm and musicality is all a real gift to us. And draws the best out of us, I think,
Ingrid's very enthusiastic and has a real passion for the music, and bringing the best out of us as a choir.
She knows her music. When she comes here, she's done a lot of practice on that music. I know that.
So many details that in a live performance you can kind of gloss over, but we kept being told, you have to actually get it right. You can't come off, it's going to be there on the recording forever, and people will hear it if it's wrong.
It's actually a really different process. So, we really worked to a sort of I don't want to say pedantic, but we worked to a really fine level that I just don't think we do when we do a live performance. We real emphasis on diction and a real emphasis on perfect timing as opposed to near enough is good enough timing. And actually, I think it was good that we kind of gave ourselves the time to do those rehearsals to get it right, because time is always the enemy on these things.
The choir worked with vocal coach William McIlwee to refine their performance.
Well, I sort of thought in two senses, there are two jobs at once. That is, one, to just do some basic work with the choir and set up some things that Ingrid as director can work with them over a period of time, so it's not just a one-shot thing. Which is often with things like this, you get in a vocal coach, they throw 34 tricks at them, and there isn't something that they can build on and can be part of the kind of, the way the choir approaches singing and technique.
Oh, we got a lot of really good information from Will. There was a lot of detailed stuff about sound production that he presented to us in a way that made sense to us, that I hadn't encountered before. So he was a good coach like that. I think we're referring back to a lot of the things he talked about still.
Oh, I found them great. I've just stolen them completely. And it's nice because we sort of have a bit of a shared language now about, what kinds of sounds we can make and ways to get there, almost shorthand of ways to get there. So if I say something, make a really tall sound or a tall breath, they've had this sort of instruction that it means that you breathe in with a lot of space at the back of your throat, a nice and low diaphragm, and then you think of projecting the sound out into a big space rather than forcing it out or anything like that. So all of that is compressed into this kind of shorthand that we've picked up.
So yeah, maybe a bit of a choir upgrade there.
Part of it was choosing to do the settings by Gerald Manley Hopkins text. Glory be to dappled things. Because Manley Hopkins was really interested in this Germanic heritage in English, he was very big on consonant clusters and the things which come from the Germanic heritage of English as against the Romance language. So the consonants are really, really important. And consonants are the hardest thing to do with singing because they actually obstruct the flow of sound. When you sing just a sequence of vowels, oh yeah, it's really easy. But as soon as you start throwing in then it gets really hard.
The thing that I found really interesting and I think challenged the choir was the slow movement and the amen bound in the fourth movement. And it's having to, the music doesn't create the energy, you have to create the impetus through these long lines. And so it was well written, as in, everyone had space and time to breathe. It wasn't overtaxing or anything, but it required a sort of focus and intensity of purpose to sing through a line and really mean it all the way to the end, to keep that physical, mental, spiritual engagement up until the end, and that all had to come from the choir, that it wasn't something that you could just ride on top of.
The third movement, the Lamb of God, that kind of litany that the bassist and tenors keep singing, Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world. It's the same every time. People go to sleep. So there were things like that where the job is to not only get the right colour, but to have a sense of shape through the entire movement.
I was kind of concerned that the rehearsals that involved that level of detail and fussing over diction and cut-offs and that kind of thing, that they would find that really tiresome or boring. But they seemed... I was so pleased with how willing they were. Like they were willing to do that work.
On the 8th of August 2020, the festival singers were recorded at Lower Hutt's St James Anglican Church.
On the day, it's really structured. You've got everyone's ready, on the go, and all the equipment is set up.
It's the first time I'd done that sort of recording before.
Yeah, really interesting process to be part of.
I think it's only the second recording I've ever done.
To see how a CD get recorded is amazing.
It was great having Phil's ears as well, because he was incredible to work with.
We found some good placements of the choir so that they sounded really, really blended.
Things like the choir was singing straight down the church, sort of to the back wall. And I was in the space and thinking, look, this sounds pretty good. It's resonant, it's lovely. And Phil comes and he orients the choir, just a few degrees that way so that the sound isn't bouncing off the back. And he said, look, the soprano harmonics are just really out of control when they're singing to the back of the church. And if you just angle them this way, can you hear the difference? I'm like, no, Phil, I cannot hear the difference, but okay. So he has the sharpest ears.
And we had a really good venue, and the church just created that beautiful sound. Yeah.
Oh, I was so happy with the choir. It was, should I say this, it was kind of hair-raising on the day, well, for me, because I felt like I had complete responsibility for the whole thing, but not complete agency. And
I mean, there were some technical hitches in the beginning, so time-wise there was a lot of sitting around waiting for the recording gear to work.
We had some moments of slight panic.
I mean, things happened on recording day, and I was actually so proud of the choir because we had delays of, I think, about an hour, and we had to stay from 10 to 4.
I thought the team managed themselves really well.
I feel like I aged about 3 years in like an hour there, but that was just me freaking out. But I mean, it wasn't actually the end of the world. We went and had morning tea, and everyone survived.
There's long periods where you're not doing much, and then it's sort of frenetic activity, and then suddenly it's all over. So yeah, but it's quite a long day.
But that's the nature of recordings, is that a lot of the time is spent finding out how you're going to work. And so you spend half your day finding out how it worked, and then you do it. And
then suddenly things just seem to come together quite well, and it's obviously a product of the amount of practice you put into it as well.
Gosh, well, it was a long day, but we didn't give ourselves very many takes at it, even though we had several goes at different parts of it. It was pretty fresh, I think, because we weren't thrashing it over. It was a one-day recording.
And turning on and off during the day so as not to get too exhausted.
They were so consistent, so they didn't need millions of takes to get things right, or it wasn't like, oh, we have to redo that take because, nobody was watching. It wasn't like that. It was like, could we do this take again and just get the diction a little clearer? Could we have a bit more energy? Could we have a bit more, dynamic direction, that kind of thing? But yeah, they were so consistent. Like, they practiced it, they learned it, they were there, and they showed up, they had energy all the way until 4 p.m., which was amazing.
Yeah, the choir maintained concentration really well. They didn't tire, so their recordings at the end of the day were, they were sharp. And it can easily happen that a choir gets worn out in a recording day because they give everything on the first couple of takes, and then where are you by 3 o'clock?
We got through it in the time that we had. It didn't go over time a long way, and at the end of the session, we were saying to each other how we still felt energised. And so obviously it wasn't a process that didn't destroy us.
Once we got it at the end, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, I think we got some really good results.
But when it comes together and you hear yourself and you go, "Ooh, that's us singing," on a CD, like famous people do that kind of stuff.
Of course, the recording engineer can then go, like that bit, I like that bit, no, we're going to cut that bit that didn't work so well, so you get a really perfect response.
So really in terms of getting the recording done and how they edit it, that's been Jonathan and Ingrid and Phil, the recording engineer, have done that.
So actually I've spent a lot of time with Phil and Jonathan, mixing, editing, choosing takes, changing things. It's been great. We've had 4 meetings, quite a few meetings of several hours each. And the most intense was choosing takes, I think.
Yes, I have had a listen to it, and it is fantastic. Eleanor, the solo singer, is just stunning. And Genevieve comes through beautifully with the soprano sax, which has a real lilt to it. And the choral singing is very good as well. So I'm very happy with the quality of the sound that we've made.
Yeah, it's really fascinating actually. It's the first time I've done this, but I kind of love it.
Really, it was Ingrid's vision that we don't do a CD.
We hire her for her musical expertise and pay a lot of attention to what she suggests and she recommends. And I think she's right. And if we want to carry on and keep producing recordings in future, then we've got to find ways of making that viable. And digital does seem to be the way of the future.
We talked about whether a work of art is finished or abandoned. How did you
Or
finish?
stops in interesting places.
In an interesting place, yes.
Yeah.
To me, the point at which that happens is the point at which the piece of music, the work, becomes somebody else's. It's no longer mine in an important sense.
It was actually so much fun, and it was so much fun to see how the choir had taken ownership of the piece, that it's their Gloria now, it's their piece, which I think was what Jonathan kind of hoped for, wanted in the way he's talked about his composing, is that when other people take possession of something and make it their own, that's much more exciting to him, I think, than just, somebody following what they think the composer's intentions are to the letter.
There's a lot of modern music out there that isn't beautiful, and everything that Jonathan writes is just so beautiful.
Yeah, I love the music and I love the people. I love the singing, but it's the people as well.
I'm not a pessimist about the choir or about Jonathan or about making music in general, but it really turned out more beautiful than I expected, better than I thought, and the experience as a whole, seeing them improve and transform, and maybe not so much transform, it's just I feel like they have a lot of capacity and a lot of potential, and seeing more of that actually be realized and be captured in a recording was just the best feeling, because I do just think they're an amazing bunch of people, and there's just this wonderful sense of community and connection. And it's a choir with such, it sounds like a cliche, but it's a choir with such a big heart, and I feel like that comes across in the recording, and that's what made the process incredible. And so it just felt like such a privilege to do this. I'm actually kind of quite sad it's over. So yeah, it was amazing.